Hi, I'm Rick Harsch, Chief Editor of Corona Samizdat, coming to you as author and Chief Editor and sponsored by Saber Guitars. But today, the topic, although it's my book and one of my best, I believe, I am going to make this an ode to Zach Tanner. If you don't know, Zachary Tanner is our cover man and our typographer and spiritual Dada advisor and comptroller maybe, I don't even know. But I've had to count on him in innumerable times to save a book, to save my ass, to save something. And he wrote as perfect a intro to The Assassination of Olof Palme by Rick Harsch et al. It's you may or may not know that this book was a communal book. I took writings from other people and fit them to this book. And, I assigned a lot of people a lot of tasks, and they did them, and some were fantastic. I probably had to change something in almost all of them, but not all of them. I got some really good stuff. I mean, there's Vesna Vulovic, the woman who in the 70s, when they was in a Yugoslav airline as a stewardess, and I think she was in the bathroom when the plane got hit by a missile. Croat terrorists, and I assigned it to a great writer from the United States named Lisa Chen, and she came up with a fantastic few pages. That one I may not have had to touch at all, but we're here to talk about and to read the introduction by Zachary Tanner. And that's where it starts. You can see that it's not going to be a typical introduction. I'll read it at the pace it needs to be read at, and we'll see how it goes. It says, Olof Palme, an introduction by an author of Olof Palme. It starts with an epigraph from Rick. I guess he recorded this, probably on WhatsApp. And so it goes like this. I think that the book, more than I realize, Harschian coffee sip interruption, needs explanation and needs it needs a good introduction. I don't think people get what's going on, and I haven't gotten a lot of feedback. I haven't gotten a lot of feed at all, and I don't know if anybody's written a review. So, and I think that's my best book. So anyway, cigarette drag. I'm asking you a favor, cigarette exhale. If you're reading it, if you still are interested in reading it, I would really love a Zach Tanner review. Rick Harsch, April 14th, 2023. Proceed. Zachary Tanner here. I'm mentioned as an author on the cover of both volumes 1 and 2 of the pocketbook Palme, even though I have contributed a Zachian zilch of anything but absquatulation whenever Rick has mentioned the project to me these last 3 years. Don't ask me why I'm listed as an author. I didn't ask to be. I have always guessed because he was writing it at the time he met me and included me as an author. It was his protocol to add everyone he met the year and a half he was finishing Olof as an author of his bizarre, impossible-to-pin-down anthological novel. So I took it as no especial flattery or effrontery. My name is simply attached to the book in yet another volume, as are others who were around when the humble indie press that gave us Cactus Boots, A Bended Circuity, and the correct Manifold Destiny of Eddie Vegas began. What seems pertinent to mention up front is I wasn't interested in reading this book for a long time. I don't know why, and I actually am quite happy to be finished reading it. Enjoy it as I did, because it was such a chore to be asked by friends and acquaintances what I was reading, and to try to have to explain verbally in small talk terms. What a fucking conundrum. If you want to dissect Palme, I've long understood, you just have to buckle your chastity belt tight, hold your breath, and write a piece yourself. Next page. Okay. Dear Richard, or as Gil LaSalle would call you, Dick Harsch. What irony the press's least read book is its most ambitious. I believe it is Corona Samizdat's forget backslash, you fucks, most ambitious novel because it is such a kerfucktion to describe on a lunch break. It was while I was reading that my manager finally asked about this book project of mine after reading 100 or so pages of my Margie, Volume 1, Corona Samizdat, 2023. And what sense the two of us were able to make of Corona Samizdat was an artsy-fartsy book venture. Describe Olof to a co-worker. Well, I didn't realize all this reading and book stuff you do was so artsy-fartsy. Describe Palme to me. See, now, I forget Rick is an artist. He does serve a function. He is redeemable. He isn't so rotten as he lets on, and I think I'd actually like to read one of his books. Tell that to Gil LaSalle. How exactly did I describe it to my wife? That was his wife speaking. What was it? I was saying how a reader I very much admire had said of Olof Palme that he didn't really like it because he couldn't tell what was fact and what was fiction. Another reader I greatly admire didn't like the small text of our pocketbooks, so never read Olof, though he was a great fan of Eddie Vegas. So I says to her, that's why I was put off from it for so long. And what I appreciate about it is exactly about that, not distinguishing between the fact and fiction of the thing, that the only way to read it was to not look anything up. Rick says there's someone who tried to read Olof with the earnest intention of looking into every detail and deconstructing it in the fashion of Joycean studies. And he never heard from that reader again. Undoubtedly, not every novel that deserves the recognition of scholarly elucidation will have its day in the sun. Hardly any of them ever do. For every Joyce, 100,000 Franzens and Denunzios. And taking a note from this bold Marco Polish wanderer of the literary waves, lost to the unified field in a language squall right out of Friedenberg. Olof Palme. Okay, so, oh my God, it's still there. Lost with this learner, this kaleidoscopic wanderer, are all of the political, factual, assassinational, and fantastical factoids a mere learned multicultural reader could no doubt provide in this space had Gil only gone on to inherit the press instead of me. But Gil blocked us. Gil isn't here, and we can't be sure he ever existed. It's just us, Rick. 1. Had Rick not redacted his contribution? 2. Had Gil not pulled the redaction from the consideration after Rick had already scrapped it? Who is Pinelli? Who is Musafalini? Who is Gil? Who is Olaf? Who is Hauser? Who is Bronco? But this isn't about Gil. This is about Rick's book, which Gil ultimately had nothing to do with, as did I, though Gil, too, was mentioned by another name on the cover of the first volume. What we are here to examine, who is Vesna Radic? Nobody knows. I can't imagine many readers who aren't Rick will be able to understand who any of the characters in this book are, who is speaking, etc. Well, I don't know, Zach. I hope some can. It defies simple understanding. It is a belletristic Pandora's box of misdirection. That may be true. I might have continued in this fashion on my iPad's freeform app, but it seems more comfortable to take a moment to switch to the use of an 11-point Calibri body, as it comprises the majority of the text. And who am I to stick with a conceit while trying to help you unpack a slippery whale like Olof Palme? And allow me to be a little bit less obtuse and dada, a little more clairvoyant and specific, even though I am officially licensed as the press's administratrix of dada, that is, creative entropy. So keep that in mind. Mere dotes and dozy dotes and little lambsy divey. Hey Wonka, I want off. Round the world and home again, that's the sailor's way. This is strange, Grandpa. Strange, Charlie, but it's fun. There's no earthly way of knowing which direction we are going. There's no knowing where we're rowing, or which way the river's flowing. Is it raining? Is it snowing? Is a hurricane a-blowing? Not a speck of light is showing, so the danger must be growing. Are the fires of hell a-glowing? Is the grizzly reaper mowing? Yes, the danger must be growing, for the rowers keep on rowing, and they're certainly not showing any signs that they are slowing. But it is still me, Zach, not Gene Wonka, not Rick Harsch. I am reminded in the very present, infinite moment by the same 4-year-old, still 4 years old, who designed the back cover to my Margie and the Atomic Brain, Volume 1, this very March. Hey, Zach! Hey, Jeff, says Phil at the end of Cactus Boots. Tomata, tomata, potato, patata, condom, condemn, gosh darn, goddamn, etc. Just yesterday, getting home from daycare, the 4-year-old came up with a pattern Rick had no problem catching on to. Shit, fuck. Shit, 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 fuck. Go ahead, try it out. No one is going to cast judgment, not in this book. Shit, fuck, shit, 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 fuck. I found it easy. That's it, louder in the back. Shit, fuck, shit, 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 fuck, shit, fuck, shit, 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 fuck. Shit, fuck, shit, 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 fuck. Very good. You passed a pivotal personality test that any decent, self-respecting 4-year-old should be able to pass. Thank you, Dr. Benwain. You have taken your scalpel and incised a new infinity in the novel where previously we thought only guns could be stored. Now fuck a monkey. Only kidding. But try to say it, or maybe think it. Fuck a monkey. The story of the assassination of Olof Palme is the story of Corona Samizdat Press in its infancy. And I don't think it is pretentious of me to say so, because of the few who actually know the story, among them, I think Rick's wife and kids, David Vardaman, Jeff Bursey, Bob, probably the Adler brothers, but never, indeed, Gil LaSalle, for he quit the moment Rick fired him and vice versa. Of these who were there, I am the one who typeset this, the definitive edition. I think I speak for everybody when I say this press has always been more of a collective or creative consortium than a non-profit indie press, and that's thanks to the assassination of Olof Palme. Last October, I finally got around to writing a review of another of Rick's books, Arjun and the Good Snake. And this is a quote from that. This is my favorite book from a magnanimous author who gifted me a fine copy of the Slovene first edition, mine inscribed Snake Lore Galore, a few days after my rock-bottom blackout on family vacation, a book for everyone who has ever been drunk, divorced, beshitten, or quite likely a simultaneous combination of all three, and now wants to revisit that trauma by the torchlight of a gifted novelist writing autobiographically in the dense fictional jungle of the mind. The bite of the poison is not something in venom, but in nature and alcohol. For Arjun's sake, don't waste your time with Eddie Vegas if you haven't read The Good Snake. Then read Eddie Vegas. We're going. Rick and I became friends and collaborators over Arjun and the Good Snake when I reluctantly admitted to him, after he so graciously let me open up to him about alcohol abuse and a half-assed suicide attempt, which he helped me see even before we were friends, was no less serious for only being half-assed, and if anything, all the more idiotic. Thanks, Rick. When he was in a bind that I was familiar with and had access to much outdated version of the Adobe Creative Suite, and we entered into this creative agreement where I get to publish whatever I want. Did we agree with that? In exchange for typesetting most everybody's books and pulling a cover out of my magic hat now and then. I also work for a paltry fee. Well, indie press. I also work for a paltry fee because we are, in fact, a non-profit press with an accountant and everything. But basically, this must all be acknowledged, I think, if you are about to enter this book that I typeset, finally got my hand at after wanting to design it for years. It was at that time when I was designing a cover for the pocketbook printing of Arjun that I had a chance to contribute to Olof originally. But like I said, I wanted no part of it. So why the change? Because Rick asked me to reconsider, and I'm the kind of friend who likes to do that sort of thing, and I was pleased, and Olof became something I wanted to own as a thing printed with my name on it, existing for its own sake. I believe in it. But didn't always, not until the past spring when Rick brought it up shortly before I vowed never to read another book out of obligation as long as I live, and thus Olof became my last. Fortunately, it is not one I begrudge. But what was my first impression? Why did it go without my noticing, without anyone noticing? Well, I was stoned, probably drunk, do too much of that personally and not enough critical, engaged reading of priceless literary object d'arts. What's your excuse? For those of you who weren't there, it was 2020, the year of Corona Samizdat, Corona for the virus and Samizdat for the underground press. The year of COVID-19. What the fuck? 2020, the birth of Corona Samizdat Press, the death of innocence, the beginning nudge of a descent down the slopes towards an inevitable and predictable fallout. But for now, there is the indie press, still kicking, still printing novels written by human beings. This is pre-cactus boots, Corona Samizdat we're talking. Something or other, COVID, money was borrowed from a mysterious patron. Rick pulls his books from Bellis and starts his own press to print Eddie Vegas, just as he likes it. And with that momentum, finally undertakes to collect final contributions to an anthropological novel idea he has been kicking around in his rusty smoke yellow tin can for some 30 years. Sick of the isolation of the fictional form, he has been writing a book in his head in which there was finally a collaborative element to fiction writing. Rick taught me to write the book in my head, which I think is kind of a key to understanding Olof. A novel like this may be difficult to understand page by page, but such is printed fiction that at the very least you get to bring the whole thing with you anywhere, like a reverse internet, instead of bringing everything everywhere all at once, like bringing somewhere sometime here at once. And isn't that a nice change of pace? Olof was originally supposed to be 4 volumes, but then became 2. That should have been 1 the whole time. What I would give to go back and give this little bit of information to the maniac who went off trying to decipher a madman's every red herring just to understand a piece of art. I think he thinks there are too many red herrings, but there are a lot fewer than he thinks. I am a reader of this book, in fact, who had to Google the names Olof Palme and Giuseppe Pinelli. There's no shame in that. But I have certain specific personal advantages. Also, even if I am dumb to history, being a sentimental dolt myself, knowing as I do that at the Iowa Writers Workshop, Rick and Buddy changed the workshop letters above the door to read Pork Show. So even if I can't tell you what this book means politically, you probably couldn't either. But maybe you'd benefit from knowing I hardly knew who Henry Kissinger was before I met Rick, much less that the asshole liked to breakfast on babies. Some scholars, or perhaps you like the kind of just drifting off. Writing this book for yourself? All books, all for one, all for all. Yes, see if it was my book, and if I had contributed something after all, surely it would be a few little dirty poems. I wonder what you might have contributed. What you might have contributed. Instead of trying to look up every little fact in the book, why not fixate on specific things and try to turn them into dirty limericks instead? Such liberty is the fun of Olof, where reader is reader. And here I know that he's thinking Chandler Broussard, but he doesn't mention it. Rick once told me that Margie must have been difficult to write because it is easy to read. He mentioned Eddie Vegas as a contrary example, which he had assured me couldn't have been simpler to write, but was a doozy for the reader. I'm not sure that's a contrary example. That might have been a mistake. Anyway, approaching the middle of the 21st century, there are fewer and fewer books worth reading, let alone ones worth reading that have been written in the last 20 years. So what will we do with what is left? If it were my book, it would go something like, I knew a fella named Pinelli, nice enough, but sure was smelly. His sister was cuter and had a nice tutor. Now there's a Pinelli in her belly. They once asked a man named Olaf, whose head they needed not roll off. I naded him in the face and posted it all over the place. Have you ever snorted Zoloft? We're not here to talk about Zach's limericks. You know, some people got it, some don't. Once I knew a married guy, LaSalle. Gil was his name, wife was Natal. They had a friend named Ben with whom they'd play pretend, who couldn't say anal. Anal said anal. That was actually better than I read it. So, we're almost done. Before I go, I want to comment on something I see as a major frustration for Rick hardly anybody understands. This will be interesting. At the very least, you can imagine the hassle of being the person to hand pack every Rick brick and throw in every free book for friends of struggling authors just trying to get published. You'd think maybe somebody or other would come along and actually read his books before ingratiating themselves into the position of publishing with his one-man press. But no, behold the work of art being lost to time before your very eyes. A book that isn't proofread. Not proofread, but there's something to that. That's certainly not a crime when you set it against the backdrop of Rick living without recognition as an artist, as if he was some sort of editor who had never dabbled in the novel. It is my firm belief that if more people who understood that the press doesn't have a submission policy, doesn't accept submissions, so it couldn't hurt to submit something and see what happens, only to find that Rick has agreed to publish the book if anybody took the time to pause and consider why it is that easy and why it doesn't have to be difficult to keep your books in print, they would see that they don't need Rick to publish their books. And that, the most difficult thing, not getting your debut novel into print after all, is to continue to push the pencil just a little further out of reach, to keep writing novels that you are happy with, even when you don't have to go through an editor. That is the true spirit of coronasimons.press. That is liberty. The beauty is Rick continuing to use the press as a vehicle to print his own books, even though no one will read them, just because it so happens to be his press. He has proudly approached the ledge, pencil in hand, disrobed, denuded, and deranged before mother, God, and friend, and he has tossed it off the ledge into the abyss. It is this principle that makes me want to lump Olof in with the great trash masterpieces. Underworld, J.R., Ducks Newbury Point, Eddie Vegas, that's nice, The Tunnel, Against the Day, Finnegan's Wake, Mulligan Stew. What I'm saying is we're bringing it out again, not because it went out of print, but because it has never left print, and still nobody reads it. I hope we're getting more purchases. I get to print what I want, as I said. Rick wondered if we should print his book, which he thought might be better than it was if it was just brought out in a big volume. But he wasn't going to say himself that getting Olof, and I said, yes, I want to work on that, so we are printing it, and nobody can fucking stop us, because art must be forefronted if the small press is to survive, if human artistry is to remain relevant. We have kept in print neglected classics like Swinburne's Love's Cross Currents and Brossard's Wake Up, We're Almost There, rescuing beloved favorites of ours from OP status. So why the fuck shouldn't we reprint our own neglected books when the relevant enormity of the creative endeavor calls for it? When a failure to find an audience isn't the author's fault, but the press's. Luckily, the press has saved and breathed new life into Olof. Behold, Rick spin the pinwheel of the commune novel like some deranged Iggy Pop, carving the prose into his very hairy chest. Not my hairy chest, I think Iggy's, because I don't have that hairy of a chest. And you'll see, sure, a not too pretty sight, but the novelist, at last, finally free of the silly business of laboring over novels. Ha, yeah. Fuck a monkey. Puff. Shoo. Hussein Nabose, Zachary Tanner, Nadzor Kakavosti, Dada. That's it. And now, I did that because I think Zach deserves a turn here. This is the photograph that was taken by Sasha Muniza. And another thing that's mentioned here is, they're packed so tight. This is the one he was talking about, Arjuna and the Good Snake. And all the more important, his own book. Now, I just want to say one thing. If you were able to follow me there, I'm not a great reader, but if you're able to follow me there, you'll know that Zach seems to think that we made a deal that I'll publish anything that he writes. But actually, that's not true. It's never come up because he's written 3 books, and although this is the grand trilogy, about a year he'll be done with the second volume, and in about a year and a half he'll be done with the third. They are fantastic books. All of his books are great, and so it's really not the way he says it. It's really odd to see Zach being, what would you call it, humble? It's not that he's not humble, but it's just that he isn't the humble, the needing, whatever. Anyway, the point is that I would have published Zach's books if I didn't know him. Now, I'm looking at you now. The thing is, I'm going to do something. I'm going to print. I have under a minute probably here, and then what I'm going to do, I'm going to put this up, and then in a few days, I'm going to come back to this book, and what I'm going to do is choose some of the historical um, content and talk about it, because history, I've noticed, turns people's heads like that. You know, I'm always looking over my shoulder. So I will be talking about some of the things that, um, as uh, important as they have been in a very, very, mm, I guess, it makes me think of like when I read about India in the 19th century, and about all the uh, snake people. I had this image always of all these British scientists running around and doing bizarre things, and that did happen. But when you imagine it in cartoon style, it's fucking crazy. But the same thing happened with historians and mostly historians about the post World War II period, and it's still happening. And I think that there's one thing that everybody in the United States should know that is central to this book, and I will talk about that when I've put a little homework in, and whatever. And I will also talk a little bit about how it works and so on. It's a fun book to read. It's not hard to read. You may not know what you're reading about, but you know. Anyway, an agomphous gobbling gourmet of graft, a shithead, a real fucking shithead. Never mind if he's a moron. He's still a detumescence of humanity, one-eyed scepter of the scum pond, an indisputable desquamation, a compulsively defecating defecation, rabies, distempered, a lupine, lunk-headed lord of laissez-faire laloplegia, a dung diver, a donkey's ass, an ass's dong. Well, I could go on, but we'll find out what that refers to, and it's factual. And I will return with factual history having to do with this book. Okay? Thanks, Zach, and thanks all of you. And I want to say one other thing. One other thing. Zach understood what is brilliant about that. If you maybe study it a little bit, is he understood how everything came together to make this press. He left out Stephen Moore and Chandler Broussard, but he couldn't put in everything. So, thanks.